So autumn fishing, everybody's favourite time of the year. Well, I would think so anyway, it's my favourite time of the year. I think the big question is nowadays, when is autumn? It sounds ridiculous, but it's moved, hasn't it? I mean, look at it now, it's October the 10th as I sit here. I'm in a t-shirt, it's 24 degrees and there's insects buzzing about everywhere. Now, my favourite time of year has always been the last 2 weeks of September, basically, from about the 12th to 14th right through to the end. And that gives you the equinox, which is around the 22nd, and quite often gives you the harvest moon as well. You can miss out a little bit, but most years the harvest moon is at the end of September. Major time to go carp fishing. I fished this harvest moon this year, 26 degrees I think it was one day over that period I fished. So you've got to reevaluate how you approach. You can't go by the calendar, you've got to go by the weather. And we all think of autumn as a big time for a feed up for the fish, and it is, but I don't think it's there yet, and we're now into October. You're looking for the big low pressures, the big winds, the change, you know, the cusp of the change towards more wintry weather, if you like. But once you've established what time of year autumn is, then you can decide how to approach it. But going back to, like, as I said, my favourite time, the end of September, the last 2 weeks of September, I've approached it very different the last 2 or 3 years. I haven't started big baiting campaigns. I've fished very lightly. I've done a lot of fishing with PVA bags, and I've done a lot of fishing with zig rigs. Now, zig rigs are often looked upon as a sort of a spring method, but in the autumn, when you get beautiful days like this, they can be really, really effective. So with the PVA bags over a baited area, my reason behind that is you often get, and we did this year on the full moon, there was a huge hatch, natural hatch. Fish were showing like mad through the evening into the night. There was insects coming off the water. You could tell by the way they were showing that they were chasing a hatch. You know, these fish are coming up, sometimes with their gobs open and hovering on the surface. They're chasing insects coming up out the water, bosh, and then going back in, which screams zigs. But also all of that food is coming from the silt. So that hatch starts on the bottom of the lake, and the fizzing can be off the chart at that time of year once they get on that natural food. And what they're doing is they're harvesting larders in the silt, natural larders, and that's what they actually want. So to put a big bed of bait out, sometimes, you know, if it's too early, if it's not the big low pressures, the big winds, the big feed up, can be counterproductive. They want what's in the silt, and you can tell that if there's no wind, it goes calm, you know, in the evening, first thing in the morning. You see big patches of fizz everywhere. And that shows you that they are taking natural food out of the silt. And what a PVA bag does A little PVA bag full of small pellets and a dark hook bait, not a pop-up. You don't want it sticking out the silt, you want it down and dirty where the fish are feeding. So a little wafter or a small bottom bait, and you're offering them a higher reward target within the natural food that they're feeding on, within the fizzing, within the bubbling, something that they come across while they're natural feeding and just think, oh, I'll have that. But if they come across a big bed of bait, they're just as likely to ignore it because that's not what they're feeding on. So you're sort of tripping them up really by just giving them this high value target in amongst what they're feeding in. And I think that's why PVA bags work so well. And you're not committed to anything. You haven't picked a swim, put a big bed of bait out there and think, right, this is me, I'm on this. With a bag, you can move around the lake. I do it all the time in the autumn. I'll take a little bucket, I've got a little PVA bucket, a rod and a net, and the system I use, you can pre-tie little mesh bags, clip them on, you see a bubbler there, plop on it, give it half an hour, and then the fizzing's over there. You're not committed to that fish. Wind in, new bag, bump, then you see them in the swim next door, or a couple top on the other side of the lake. Same thing, grab your little kit, get round there, get on them, and spend your days like that. I think it's important not to commit too much. You see people, they turn up, the bivvy goes up, the bed goes up, the table goes up, the cob cooker comes out, everything's set, the bait goes in. You can never take that bait back out, it all goes in at the beginning, which is great when we're in real autumn, but we're not at this time of year. And then you're committed to that plot. But you can nick so many bonus fish just by going round and round and looking, and not just in the daytime. What happens at this time of year as you get into autumn, the showing time and a lot of the feeding time becomes a lot more nocturnal. If you're up, it gets dark in the autumn at what we're saying, 8 o'clock, something like that. By 10 o'clock, you've probably seen more in those 2 hours than you've seen all day. You stay up later, midnight, 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock in the morning, or get up at that time, then you can see where they are, where they're showing, and formulate your attack for the session. So yeah, staying mobile in what used to be the hot time, end of September, beginning of October, really can pay dividends. And at the moment, right now, that's what I'm doing. I'm fishing with a few little bits and pieces. I've got a zig out there, I've got a couple of PVA bags out there, and I'll sort out the rest later. So the thing about the bubbler season, I call it, when you get this emergence of a mass of natural food and the carp get on it and move about, they're harvesting, but they harvest, they either finish it or it finishes, but the bubbler season stops as quickly as it starts. At some stage in the latter autumn, suddenly you'll notice that there isn't all the fizzing in the morning, there isn't all the fizzing in the evening. If it drops flat, you're not seeing your chuffer trains going along the surface, where they're ripping up the bottom. And the weather's changing. Early mornings, they're a lot damper, mistier, cooler, and you haven't got the top temperatures in the daytime. And that's the time it changes, that's the time, the big lows, the big winds. Then you can get on your bait. Then I like to get on bait. I like to fish boilies when it's what I consider proper autumn, and you can have some big hits by, you'll have spent the few weeks moving around the lake, like I say, fishing mobile. You'll have learned a lot from what you've seen, and you might notice that the fish are more inclined to show in 1 or 2 or 3 areas, and you've got that in here, and they're the areas you're going to target for your baiting, and you want to get your bait going in while they're still properly feeding. And that can take you through into the winter. If you're staying on that same lake through into the winter, the early part of the winter, you can keep them fish feeding. You can have a bonanza when they get on the bait. When the natural's gone, suddenly they want bait, and you can use quite a lot of bait at that sort of late autumn. Like I say, I can't give you dates on it because it all seems to change. This year, it looks like the proper autumn might not come until I mean, it's 10th of October now. It might be November before it's autumnal, if you like. It's still all green everywhere. But you can tell, it doesn't matter what the calendar says. You just look at the weather and you think, you know, and the way the fish are behaving, and you think, yeah, now's the time. That's the time to get your bait in. That's the time to put your boots down and your sticks in and think, right, I'm going to fish here. This is a good area. You might know it from, you know, historical records of the lake. This is where they're going to be. I'm going to bait heavy. I'm going to fish these spots and I'm going to cash in. But until that time, you know, don't invest all your stuff too early in what's going to happen in 2 or 3 weeks' time. Worry about that then. Catch what you can catch now. Keep your eye on the water. When the weather turns, that's the time to get the boilie bucket out and like the catapult and really start having a go at it.